Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Crane. Thank you for joining me today. A little later than usual, but we've been trying to dig up some information for you about the intervention. I can't say WAR yet in the broadcast. We'll say that later. And I think we've got some interesting information. So you're watching Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Crayden. The station is Crayden's Right, and we'll be right back with more of the news that you need to know.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist.
Okay. We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
So we're doing it live as we do 7 days a week here, usually 10 o'clock Eastern time. A little later today, as I said. And here's a comical moment with our beloved Prime Minister, Mark Carney.
Has more fun. Well, boy, the dinners at Basel were, they were crazy. Right? Very good wine. Yeah.
Go and tell the story. Tell it.
Well, okay, this is a long time ago. In fact, it was 2 weeks into the job at Governor of the Bank of Canada. It's February 2008. And I go there, and Bear Stearns is collapsing. It seemed like a big deal at the time. In retrospect, it was like, there's nothing, but it was a big deal. And we had to decide, because Asia, typical Asia was going to open. And so we go to this dinner, and it's called the G10 Central Banks. So it's the core group of central banks, and Jean-Claude Trichet is the chair. We show up, and we have an hour and a half to make a decision about flooding the system with liquidity or shutting certain things down, etc. It was pretty complex, but we're around this dinner table. It's like a 7-course meal. And Trichet spends the first 10 minutes. He welcomes me, which I thought was nice. Mark, welcome. And then he says, we have the best wine in Europe at this dinner. And since it's the best wine in Europe, it's the best wine in the world. And then he goes through the wines. He describes all the wines, tick, tick, tick. And he's like, well, have this one, but, the Pinot Grigio. And I'm like, fuck. And then he finishes it, and he says, okay, listen, we have an hour. And he says, okay, we have to decide, because the politicians are useless, basically, as he says. And if we don't decide here, all is lost. Ben, what should we do? Anyways, an hour later, all I remember is I'm like, yeah, the wine is fantastic. How much are we on the hook for? But anyways, we got it done. So yeah, the central bankers have a lot more fun, and we're working all the time. No fun, no rest.
Right.
No rest.
Oh, doesn't Mark Carney know how to have a good time, whether it's as the Bank of England governor or as the Prime Minister of Canada, jet setting around the world for, is that for Canada or is that for Brookfield Asset Management? Here's Mark Carney in a little less comical circumstances.
I don't think he's had a big think. I don't think he's sat down in the sauna and thought about this.
And then Carney, once again, does not like to be questioned either. And this is another female reporter, and he gets a little snipey here. Let's play this clip starting at 18:39 here.
Run their course. Thanks. Next question.
Morning, Prime Minister. Stephanie Taylor, National Post. You have outlined what steps Canada is doing to protect citizens from foreign interference and in transnational repression, but a lot of confusion exists, including within your own cabinet, about what Canada thinks India is doing. So I'm hoping that you can clarify in a yes or no way. Do you agree with your own government official, yes or no, who suggested India is no longer actively interfering in Canada's democratic process and that Indian agents are no longer involved in murders and extortions within Canada? Yes or no?
Well, I'm not sure that's an exact quote.
That is what he suggested.
That's not a quote.
I can read the quote.
I think, we can debate whether you had a discussion that was not for quotation, but if you want to read a quote from something that's not for quotation. These are the words I would use, and this is important. I would not use those words, okay? First point. Secondly, our approach, as I said in response to
That was the famous Carney temper, which he likes to... I mean, I hate to sound like... It sounds so cheap and crass, and I'm usually really against this kind of thing, when people try and bring in, like, sex or race or something like that to try and push some agenda. But once again, the Carney temper flashes for a woman. It seems to be, I don't know, like, there are... For all that there's loads of people that talk a load of crap about things like that all the time, there are, in fact, men and women who treat women or men differently. You know, they treat people differently based on their sex.
And sometimes women, bosses, treat female underlings worse than men do. Have you noticed that in the workforce? I've heard a lot of women comment on that over the years, that it's harder to work for a female boss because they treat them like they're second-class citizens. And whereas men don't always do that. I certainly never have. It's not my style. Interesting. But so what's happening with the war? I think, well, we can say it now. It really is. And I want to show you what is happening. According to the U.S. Navy, they just sunk an American submarine, sunk an Iranian warship that thought it was safe in international waters. So here we go. Let's watch the whole thing again. There she blows. Now, pretty hard to argue with that. That's video footage from the United States Navy, Department of War or Defense, depending upon who you talk to. And this is interesting here. Yeah, there's a lot of briefings on here. We're not going to watch that. But this is good because it shows you so we of course will be quite happy to show you that footage, but you know, there's reports, of course, right now that, and I find this kind of interesting. There's reports right now that the United States has sunk the entire Iranian Navy. Now, there's no evidence at all for this. But I'm going to show you a couple of clips in a minute. I think that's going to absolutely shock you to the core in terms of what's happening. This is interesting here. Chris Brunet. In Alberta, if you stab your 8-year-old daughter in the neck and sever 75% of her esophagus, the judge will brag about how 5 years is a harsh prison sentence if you castrate yourself. Wesley Yang writes, Alberta judge is proud of his severity in sentencing a trans-identified male who stabbed his 8-year-old daughter in the neck, severing 75% of her upper esophagus, calling the 5-year sentence he imposed a clarion call of deterrence and denunciation. You know, people are not buying this one at all. This is another story that is really angering people. And this psycho is going to go to a women's prison because he hasn't terrorized enough victims yet. Oh, crazy. Post-millennial, my organ, Canada nears 100,000 assisted suicides, has made deaths surpass every other country. Whoa, aren't you proud to be Canadian? Canada is living, if that's not an oxymoron, in a cult of death. Yeah, we have a cult of death in this country. We absolutely glamorize abortion as being a fundamental human right. We have unrestricted abortion on demand way up to delivery. We have lots of late-term abortions going on, and we're going to be talking about that later in the week. This is all happening. This is all reality. This is all really what Canada is about. And the other, of course, the other end of the spectrum, if you will, is medical assistance in dying. Euthanasia is incredibly open and accessible in this country. And of course, the whole healthcare system in Canada, as we have reported unceasingly, is absolutely broken. Absolutely broken. Canadian government offers man death. Why? Because he's poor. Yeah, made as an alternative to poverty. You don't have to be poor. You could be dead. Remember how people, I mean, I shouldn't laugh. Remember how people said, you know, I may be down on my luck, but at least I'm alive. That's not the philosophy in Canada at all. And yes, we reported this the other day. Carney continues to use our pension plan as leverage in his trade deals. So I want to get to these clips here because a lot of you are, of course, I know I'm dealing with an audience that's largely supportive of the American attack on Iran, the essential assassination of the Ayatollah, Khomeini, I think that's how it's pronounced, as opposed to his predecessor was Khomeini. Yeah, Iran has its severe problems. So we know that. It's not a democracy like we recognize a democracy, but Canada isn't either. We are on the precipice of losing our fundamental freedoms in this country. We're losing our free speech. So who are we to lecture other countries for not being sufficiently democratic? So you're not seeing a lot of footage of this war. You're seeing, we showed you the U.S. Navy video there of a submarine being sunk and of Tomahawk missiles being fired off a ship. Now, that of course, is a staple of war news. People love to see missiles going off and crashing and being fired at buildings and buildings falling down. We saw this, of course, throughout Gaza. There's I won't get into that one. But what's really at stake in this war in Iran? This might surprise you. It surprised me. Why is the Strait of Hormuz so important?
The weaponry, this map will tell you exactly how this war will progress. All right, so some certain things to keep in mind about this map. This is what we call this area, okay, really small, it's 33 kilometers wide, okay? People can swim across it. It's really, really narrow, okay? This small area, guys, it's called the Strait of Hormuz, all right? And it's important because it's really the center of the world. This one area is the nexus, the pivot of the world. Let me explain why. First of all, from the GCC, you have 20% of all the world's oil flowing through this narrow strait. Where does it go, guys? It goes to Asia, India, Pakistan, South Korea, China, Japan. India depends on 60% of its oil from this area. China depends on 40%. Japan, 75%. Prime Minister Takeichi of Japan has said that, listen, if the Strait of Hormuz closes, we will run out of oil in about 8-9 months.
Now, this is Professor Jiang. He keeps talking about the GCC. That's the Gulf Cooperation Council. So it's the countries that are essentially, loose coalition in this part of the world.
The entire Japanese economy would collapse in 8-9 months if the Strait of Hormuz were to close. And guess what? The Iranians have closed the Strait of Hormuz. Okay? So we can expect that the entire global economy will suffer greatly over the next few months. All right? So that's point number one. Point number two is, okay, so the GCC sends oil across the Strait of Hormuz, and what do they get back in return? Food, guys. All right, so people don't appreciate the GCC, but it is really the linchpin of the American empire. Because what is the American empire? The American empire is the petrodollar. All right? The idea of the petrodollar is this. The US dollar is worth nothing. It's only valuable if people want it. But the GCC says that if you want oil from us, you have to pay us in US dollars. Okay? Then that is the basis of the value of the US dollar. So, if the GCC collapses, the American economy and the American empire both collapse at the same time. The problem, though, is the GCC is an artificial construct of empire. It does not exist naturally. Why? Because there's no food, there's no oil, no water. Okay, guys? No food, no water. So these cities are able to grow in the millions because of all these petrodollars flowing in. If you close off the Strait of Hormuz, there's no food coming in, right? They're all going to starve. How much food does the GCC get from overseas? 80%. 80% of all the food it consumes comes from overseas, that it imports. It does not grow by itself, it imports. All right? So the Strait of Hormuz is really key. And again, the Iranians will close it in order to strangle the global economy and therefore bankrupt the American empire. All right? Second thing you will notice is these mountains. These mountains is what we call Iran. All right, this is Iran. This is GCC. Okay, this is not a fair matchup, right? Because these are mountains. And what can you do in mountains? Well, you can hide rocket bases. You can hide drone bases. You can hide missiles. And that's the entire Iranian offensive strategy, all right? From here, they can hide missiles and drones from which to attack the GCC. And what are they attacking? They're attacking three things, right? They're attacking American military bases. American military bases. That's number one. Okay? Is it possible for the Americans to defend against these attacks? The answer is no. They're not. It's not. It's the silliest thing in the world. You have all these bases in the Middle East, but you cannot defend them against the Iranians. That's kind of strange.
Yeah, it's kind of strange also. And I saw numerous reports about this morning, is that all of these people, Americans who are working at these bases, at embassies, there's no game plan to get them out of the region. And it's hard to imagine how bad things really are. This war is escalating, as I predicted it would. And there are places throughout the Middle East that are just not safe. And of course, this is what we're getting at today. This is the purpose of this broadcast, is to underline the fact that what happens to all of these people in the region. And when you see this next segment with Professor Jiang, you'll understand exactly what I'm saying and why I'm saying it. Because this area could be under severe problems in terms of not having adequate drinking water or food. Because as the professor mentioned there, you seal off the Strait of Hormuz, it's not just oil that's not getting through. 20% of the world's supply, 60% of India's supply. Food is not getting through to the region because they have to import all of their food. And they have to desalinate their water. I didn't even know this. Wait till you hear this next section here, because this is absolutely fascinating in terms of how the US and Israel really envision, how do I put this in a way that's not too offensive, starving and keeping water from the population of the Middle East. That's going to be one of the effects of this war. And of course, there's going to be massive amounts of refugees from this war. Every war creates refugees. Second World War created hundreds of thousands of refugees, displaced persons, they were called at that time. This war will create a lot. Where do you think they're going to go? I had a friendly debate the other day, I think it was Monday, with my friend Mark Petroni on Saga 960. I guest with him every week for half an hour, talk about the news of the day. And he's very much in favor of this war. But I said to him after, where do you think those refugees are going to go? Well, I would suggest a lot of them are going to come to Canada, because that's always what happens. Because U.S. uproots millions of people with these conflicts. Where do you think all the people of Gaza are going to go if they don't fit in to the U.S.-Israeli co-prosperity scheme or co-prosperity sphere, which envisions the entire Gaza Strip being turned into one large casino and resort complex? So what happens to all those Palestinians who are living there, have had their homes destroyed, and really won't have any part in the new Gaza? Well, they'll become refugees, and where do you think they'll come? To Canada. And you think we're going to have more demonstrations in the streets about that? It will never end, because that's another thing foreign wars produce, is more protest in other countries. Let's listen to this incredible analysis of the water situation.
This is what we call the Shahad drones. Shahad drones. Each of these drones costs $50,000 at most, okay? At most. It can go as cheap as $35,000 US. But one of them is $50,000. As you can see, you can fit a lot of these drones to a truck that can go anywhere in Iran, and they can hide anywhere. All right? So the thing to understand is, first of all, these drones are cheap. They're easy to make. They make about 500 a day. Okay? And estimates are about there's 80,000 right now that the Iranians have. So they can go on for a long, long time. Okay? And one of these drones, again, can knock out a desalination plant. It can knock out an oil field. It can knock out a hotel. It can do a lot of damage. Okay? And it's easily transportable. You can hide it anywhere. You can use it from anywhere, okay? And that's what the Iranians are using as an offensive weapon. And how do the Americans defend against this? They use something called a THAAD, right? Right, guys? This is what they use. THAAD. THAAD stands for Thermal High Altitude Air Defense. And they also have like Patriot systems. There's a lot, okay? The thing that you need to know about the system is it's really expensive. This missile, guys, costs $1 million.
Okay, we'll go back to the professor in a minute. Did you just hear that? So the drones are $50,000 a piece maximum. The anti-drone, the anti-missile defense system is $1 million a shot. So it's cheaper to go on the attack. Much, much cheaper. But you know what? This is the horrifying thing about war. Is that the price tag doesn't matter because it's generating money for the military industrial complex, for the war armaments that are making trillions of dollars off the suffering and misery of other people. And so it's not about even winning the war quickly. It's about how much money can be spent winning that war or even losing that war. Now, to go back to the Vietnam War, some people made personal fortunes off of that war, including Lyndon Johnson, the president, who had lots of money invested in military helicopters. A lot of people made a lot of money off the war in Vietnam because clearly, if you look at that war and you say, well, couldn't the Americans have won that war? And of course, they ended up losing Vietnam. And by 1973, they had basically lifted the responsibility to the South Vietnamese. By 1975, the South Vietnamese were being chased down to Saigon by the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese army, and the war was lost. So a war that began in a large way after the Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964, 11 years later, finally ground to an abysmal end as Americans, the last Americans evacuated, brought some of their South Vietnamese allies with them. But it was an ignoble end to this war. But it didn't really matter to the people who made money off of that war, because that was the whole point, to keep the war going as long as possible, not to win. Winning was never really an objective. It was just to be there, to appear to be containing communism, which to some degree they did, except when they lost, and communism did in fact expand. The domino theory proved to be right. But the United States kept that war going because it was so profitable for some people. And that's exactly what's happening right now in Iran.
$1 million. So there's this $50,000 drone coming your way, and you throw a $1 million missile at it, okay? And often these missiles miss, so you have to throw 2 or 3 missiles at it, okay? So you're spending $2 to $3 million on each $50,000 that the Iranians spend. That's kind of silly. Second thing you'll notice is that this thing is really big and really slow. And therefore, you can't really move it around. Therefore, it's pretty easy for the Iranians to spot where this is and attack it. And then when these things blow up, that's a lot of money, guys. Okay? Then you're like, what? But this makes no sense. You know the Iranians have drones. They've had drones for like 10 years. You've also seen drones used in the Russia-Ukraine war to devastating effect. Why don't the Americans know this? Why did they prepare? Okay, and again, it has to do with military doctrine. Because military doctrine determines how you fight a war, it determines on your bureaucracy, and it determines how you spend your resources, okay? And unfortunately, the Americans are used to fighting something called the Cold War, right? And the Cold War, because you can actually fight the war, you can actually use, kill each other because then people use nuclear weapons. The Cold War was about flexing. Flexing, okay? You see how big and powerful I am? Me, okay? That's all it was. These weapon systems are designed to scare the crap out of you. They are designed to impress you. And as a result, they cost a lot of money, and they really don't do anything, all right? So that's the entire American military. It costs a lot, and it doesn't really do anything. And it's not resilient. It's not innovative. It's not open, all right? Also, the other thing I have to say this, okay, is if you look at the American military, it's corrupt. So this is really about corruption. So the Americans don't really care about winning a war. What they care about is spending as much money as possible because then they get a cut. It doesn't make sense. All right, and that's why the Americans are in the situation as they are. All right, let's continue. All right, so something that people don't really talk about, but you need to understand.
Okay, note well what he's going to say here about the water situation. I had no idea the water situation was this bad in the Middle East, that there was literally no water. I mean, yeah, sure, you can say, of course there isn't. It's a desert. But you kind of think, well, they must have enough water to suit their need. They don't. They have to desalinate salt water just to have enough fresh water to drink or to use for other purposes. You can't wash your clothes in salt water. But this is absolutely frightening.
And it's the water issue in the GCC, in the Middle East, in Iran. All right? So this is a map of the world. And if you are light blue, Brazil, Canada, you have nothing to worry about because you have a lot of water, a lot of fresh water, very little population. All right? So 100% just means 100% water stress just means that you drink as much water as the environment produces. Okay? So you want to be below 100% to be sustainable. Ideally, you want to be at 10%, okay? If it goes above 100%, it means that you are drinking more water, using more water than the environment actually produces. Okay, so you're putting stress on the environment. So 200% is really bad, right? Because you're using twice as much water as the environment produces. Guess what, guys? Look at the Middle East, okay? Egypt. 6,420%. Saudi Arabia, 883%. All right? Bahrain, almost 4,000%. Dubai, 17,000%. All right? So water is a huge issue. Again, it doesn't matter if Iran kills American soldiers, destroys American military. It doesn't have to do that. All it has to do is destroy the desalination plants. And then the GCC is destroyed, okay? But it's also true that Iran has water issues. 72% is pretty bad, okay? So even though the Iranians could destroy the GCC much faster than the Americans could destroy Iran, Iran is still in trouble, okay? So let me give you an example of this. This is like, so this is another map that shows you the issue of water scarcity, okay? And it's just basically the Middle East, okay? Their biggest issue in the future is water, okay? And that's where the geopolitical tensions will arise in the future over water. India is also affected as well, okay? All right. All right. So let's look at the map, guys. This is called Lake Urmia in northern Iran. It's the 6th largest.
Now this is fascinating. Just look at the level of water in this lake, which the Iranians are using to desalinate the water from this saltwater lake and use it. And look how much it's gone down.
Largest saltwater lake in the world, or it used to be. Okay, this is what it was in 1984. This is the shallow, this is the deep, okay? You guys see that? It's really big, right? 20 years later, guys, this is what it looks like. There's no more water here. You can walk from here over to there, okay? There's some water over here, but it's shallow now. That's how serious the water issue is in Iran. And that's the weak point that the Americans and the Israelis will attack. All right? They want to make sure that Iran has no access to fresh water, which will cause devastation in their nation. Okay, that's strategy number one. Strategy number two is this. This is a map of the different ethnic minorities in Iran. As you can see, it's a very diverse place. In the center are the Persians, but you also have 10 other groups as well. And in the borderlands, it's basically a different country, right? Like, these are basically different countries. And so these places have more common areas with their neighbors than they do with Iran. Okay, so the second weakness of Iran. The first is the water. The second is the ethnic makeup of the country. So the strategy of the Americans and the Israelis moving forward is to destroy Iran as a coherent nation state, divided into ethnic enclaves, and have them fight over water. That is the grand plan of the Israelis and the Americans. Okay. All right. This is the vision where Persia is limited, and then all these other places are sponsored by the Americans and the Israelis. They're given money, they're given weapons, they're given political support, and then this war will wage over water forever. Okay? And this is how you destroy Iran and make sure Iran is no longer a viable threat to you. That is the plan of the Americans. Okay? As you can see, it's a pretty evil plan. And that's why they have not announced it. Right? Because if you announce it, you're like, why are you doing this? What did the Persians, what did the Iranians ever do to you to warrant you coming and destroying their civilization? And the answer is nothing. Right? So the Americans, Israelis will never admit they're doing this. But if you look at the map of water supply, of ethnic tensions, this is the optimal game theory strategy for them to use against Iran. Okay.
So, you've heard me say over the past few days, I'd like to know what the plan is for this war. Because every war has a plan. The U.S. Civil War, there's at the beginning, the North had a very clear strategy to win that war. It was to cut off the coast with a naval blockade, to wage war against the western section of the Confederacy at the same time as waging war against the eastern part of the Confederacy, led by Robert E. Lee. And of course, that proved to be a very successful strategy. What is plan A? Because we know there's no plan B, but what is plan A for the United States? Well, clearly, based on the conjecture here of this professor, and I find this quite interesting, it is to literally create civil war, chaos, and starvation. And I can't think of the word for lack of water, but massive thirst that will not be satiated in the region. This sounds like a war from the Middle Ages. This is going to create, if this keeps going, and I don't see how this is going to stop like today or tomorrow, just because a ship is sunk. We're not seeing much footage from Israel. That's kind of seen as defeatist if you show video of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem on fire. We're not seeing much footage at all in this war. It's like there's nobody there. It's very, very odd that way. But what we are seeing increasingly is a plan to create a human catastrophe in the Middle East, not just in Iran, but in the surrounding states. These countries are all going to be losing their desalination facilities if the bombing continues. They're going to be knocking each other's abilities out. And oil fields are being set on fire. This is going to drive up the price. How is this going to affect Canada? Well, it's going to, your price of your gas is already going up every day, if you've noticed. It's going to increase the price of food. It's going to increase the price of everything. And ultimately, you're going to see another refugee crisis that we haven't seen in, 80 years plus. So this war is going to have severe consequences on all of us. And of course, What about those terrorist attacks? I'm somewhat reluctant to talk about something that hasn't happened yet, but we know a lot of terrorists got into the United States and Canada during the Joe Biden presidency when there was an open southern border in the United States. We know there were a lot of terrorist cells operating. And according to intelligence I saw the other day, the U.S. military personnel are being advised by the intel section of the Department of War or Department of Defense, however you want to call that, to stay away from large sporting events, large malls, large concerts, anywhere where there are large numbers of people. When was the last time you heard that? Well, yes, during COVID, of course, another time we were all being played, but during the Gulf War and after 9/11, I don't remember how many times there were threats that a major mall in Toronto or Ottawa was going to be targeted. Stay away from the malls, sporting events. So here we go again. And these are going to be effects and repercussions from this war that will continue to affect us. Now, I want to show at the end here, this it's a clip from Charlie Kirk. And I don't know if you've been following all, I haven't, I've mentioned it maybe once or twice. All of the controversy surrounding Charlie Kirk's very untimely death, the assassination. Do I believe it was the guy who's been charged? Every day it looks less and less like that was the culprit. Do I think Turning Point USA had some perverse relationship to this? It looks increasingly likely and believable that Charlie Kirk had made enemies all over the place, including people who think it's my Israel right or wrong. No matter what Israel does, I will support it. It doesn't matter. Israel does it. I'm 100% behind it. By the end of his life, Charlie Kirk had distanced himself from that position. In fact, had rebuked that position and rebuked others who held it. So it looks very much like there is a spending problem at Turning Point USA, that money was not being accounted for. There's hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into this organization. People were getting, and I think Charlie Kirk was beginning to look, hey, folks, where's all the money coming from and where's all the money going? And that's a question a lot of people are asking right now, because his situation is very, very mysterious. But here's Charlie, and a lot of people are saying right now, and if you watch Turning Point USA talk shows right now, they've got people saying Charlie would be behind this war. He loved Donald Trump. He supported Donald Trump. Well, I've always supported Donald Trump too, and I've always loved Donald Trump. I don't think he's doing what Donald Trump should be doing right now, or what Donald Trump promised to do in 3 election campaigns, including the 2024 presidential election. He's doing the exact opposite of what he promised to do. But I don't think Charlie Kirk would be approving of this war. I think he would say, folks, we can't even afford to pave our roads. We have people dying. People are not able to access decent health care. Neither are we in Canada, by the way, even though it's supposedly free. We can't build bridges. We've lost our manufacturing sector. We've got millions of people addicted to fentanyl and opioids, overdoses. The heartland of America there's a very dark underside to drug abuse. Let's get our act together. Let's stop trying to solve everyone else's problems and let's try to solve our own. And you know, I used to be one of these people, and I'm ex-military and I'm very proud to have served my country. And I was very proud to have worked with our American allies over the years Nothing but good things to say about those American allies. However, I remember saying, we have to spend trillions of dollars on the defense because, well, if we don't, we're going to be weak. And we don't want to spend it on anything else, do we? But when I think about the obscene amount of money that's spent on wars, maybe we could be using some of that money to make life better for some people. Maybe we could be offering more recovery programs for people who were killing themselves on fentanyl and other drugs. Maybe we could be offering clean drinking water to parts of the world that have never seen it, including some reserves in Canada where Indigenous people get nothing from all of the money that's being dispensed by the federal government, provincial governments, because the chiefs eat it all. But that's another point. But maybe we could be making life a little better for people with the trillions of dollars we're spending on defense. We don't need another foreign war. And I've said this the last 3 days. We got played during COVID. This was a man-made pandemic engineered to make Big Pharma rich and to take away our fundamental freedoms. And that's exactly what happened during the pandemic. We lost our freedom of speech. We lost our freedom to say no. We lost our freedom of mobility. And Big Pharma got very rich. And some people are getting very rich off of this war right now. So that's where I want to leave it today. But here's Charlie Kirk, just before he died, talking about how he felt about potential at that time war in Iran.
Yeah, you're going to have to earn our trust on this one. This is more Israel pushing for Iran. But is that America's problem? That's a question. I mean, maybe the answer is yes. Maybe the answer is, you know what? They were wrong about Iraq. They were wrong about Syria. They were wrong about Afghanistan. They were wrong about the Taliban. They were wrong about Libya. They were wrong about the Arab Spring. They were wrong about Yemen. They were wrong about the Arabian Peninsula. They were wrong about the 9/11 hijackers being Saudi Arabian. But hey, 10th time's a charm. This time we're actually right. Yeah, you're going to have to earn our trust on this one.
What more can I say? There's a moment with Charlie Kirk, a moment a lot of people are not being allowed to see, because that's not the Charlie Kirk some people want to remember. Thanks for watching today, folks. We love you. God bless. Godspeed to all of your work and efforts. And we'll be back again tomorrow at the usual time. Thank you for sharing this station with your friends and family. Thank you for hitting that like button, because I tell you, we are fighting back in a way I've never had to before, because I'm going to keep this station on the air. I'm going to keep fighting for freedom. I'm going to keep fighting for justice and truth. And I am damn determined to resist this Carney government in any way possible as it encroaches upon our individual freedom. And it will continue to do that, mark my words. I'll be back again tomorrow. Same time, same place. 10 a.m. This has been David Krayden, broadcasting live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.